The golden sun was setting over the kingdom of Umuaro, casting long shadows across the land. In the royal palace, a sense of foreboding loomed heavy in the air. Ikin, the young prince, sat beside his sister Adana's bed, his heart weighed down with sorrow. Adana, once full of life and laughter, now lay weak and frail, her breath shallow and her skin pale. The royal healers had tried everything in their power, but her condition only worsened with each passing day. Ikin had always been close to his sister. They had grown up playing together, sharing secrets, and dreaming of the future. The thought of losing her was unbearable. As he sat there, holding her hand, an old tale whispered in his mind, a tale told by the village griot about the Sapir forest, a place feared by all for its dark magic and twisted mysteries. According to legend, deep within the heart of the forest lay the grove of forgotten dreams, where the dreams of those who had passed on lingered, taking on a life of their own. It was said that among these dreams was one that held the power to cure any illness. The forest, however, was cursed. Any living being who entered would have their own dreams stolen, leaving them hollow and aimless. The story of the Sapir forest was a cautionary tale, meant to keep the curious and the foolish from venturing into its depths. But to Ikin, it was a beacon of hope, the last chance to save his sister. That night, as the palace slept, Ikin packed a small satchel with provisions. He knew the journey would be perilous, but the thought of Adana's condition worsening pushed him forward. Before he left, he knelt by her bedside, whispering a promise that he would return with the cure. With determination etched on his face, Ikin slipped out of the palace, the cool night air biting at his skin. The path to the Sapir forest was long and treacherous, but Ikin's resolve was unshakable. He would face any danger, brave any challenge, to save his sister. As he neared the edge of the forest, a chill ran down his spine. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the light of the moon barely penetrated the dense canopy. Ikin hesitated for a moment, the weight of the legends pressing down on him. But with a deep breath, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the cursed forest. The moment he entered, the world around him seemed to shift. The air grew colder, and a faint whispering filled his ears. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision, and the trees seemed to bend and twist as if alive. But Ikin pressed on, guided by the faint hope that somewhere within this dark and twisted place lay the dream that could save his sister. Unbeknownst to Ikin, he was being watched. High above, in the branches of the tallest tree, a figure shrouded in darkness observed the young prince. The dream thief, once human but now a twisted shadow of his former self, had sensed Ikin's presence the moment he stepped into the forest. The thief smiled, his teeth glinting in the darkness. Another dream had entered his domain, and he intended to claim it. As Ikin ventured deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, the shadows more pronounced. But he kept his focus, ignoring the strange and unsettling sights around him. He had no choice but to trust in his instincts, hoping they would guide him to the grove of forgotten dreams. But the Sapir forest was not a place where trust came easily, and as Ikin would soon discover, the true test of his resolve was only just beginning. The deeper Ikin ventured into the Sapir forest, the more it seemed to close in around him. The trees, tall and ancient, twisted and gnawed, created a labyrinth of branches and shadows that seemed to shift with every step. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the whispers that had started as faint murmurs now echoed all around him, like the voices of the dead. Ikin's grip tightened on the hilt of his father's old machete, which he had taken as a precaution. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, trying to discern what was real and what was an illusion. But the forest was a place where reality was fluid, and Ikin quickly realized that his senses could not be trusted. As he pushed through a dense thicket, Ikin stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient baobab tree, its trunk thick and covered in strange, glowing runes. The tree seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and for a moment, Ikin was entranced by its beauty. But the moment was short-lived. From behind the tree emerged a figure, tall and imposing, with skin as dark as the night and eyes that glowed like embers. The figure was draped in tattered robes, and around his neck hung a necklace of bones. Ikin's heart raced as the figure stepped forward, his presence exuding a sense of power and danger. "You should not be here, young prince," the figure said, his voice deep and resonant, like the rumble of thunder. "The forest is not kind to those who seek to take what is not theirs." Ikin swallowed hard, his grip on the machete tightening. "I mean no harm," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I seek only a dream that can cure my sister." The figure's eyes narrowed, and he tilted his head slightly, as if considering Ikin's words. "The Grove of Forgotten Dreams is not a place for the living," he said slowly. "Those who enter risk losing their very essence. Are you willing to pay such a price?" Ikin hesitated, the weight of the question heavy on his heart. But the image of his sister, pale and weak, filled his mind, and he knew there was no turning back. "I will do whatever it takes," he said firmly. The figure studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Very well. But know this, the forest is not what it seems. The dreams you seek are not easily found, and the path to them is fraught with danger. You will face your deepest fears and desires, and the forest will try to take them from you. But if you are strong, if you are true to your purpose, you may yet succeed." With that, the figure turned and began to walk away, his form slowly fading into the shadows. But before he disappeared completely, he paused and looked back at Ikin. "Beware the dream thief," he warned. "He feeds on the dreams of the living, and he will stop at nothing to claim yours." And with that, the figure was gone, leaving Ikin alone in the clearing. The young prince took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. The encounter had shaken him, but it had also strengthened his resolve. He knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he was prepared to face whatever the forest threw at him. With renewed determination, Ikin turned and continued his journey deeper into the forest, unaware that the dream thief was already watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As Ikin ventured further into the supple forest, the landscape began to change. The dense, tangled trees gave way to a misty, otherworldly landscape, where the ground seemed to shift and shimmer beneath his feet. The air was thick with an eerie glow, and the whispers that had haunted him since entering the forest grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't long before Ikin found himself standing before a vast, shimmering lake. The water was still, like a mirror, reflecting the twisted trees and the pale, ghostly light of the moon. But as Ikin stepped closer, he realized that the lake was not made of water, it was made of dreams. The surface of the lake rippled with the faint images of people, places, and events. Ikin watched in awe as scenes from long-forgotten lives played out before him, joyous celebrations, heart-wrenching farewells, moments of triumph and despair. These were the dreams of the dead, lingering in the forest, forever reliving their final moments. As Ikin stared into the lake, he felt a strange pull, as if the dreams were calling out to him, urging him to join them. But he resisted, remembering the warning of the mysterious figure. He knew he could not allow himself to be drawn in, no matter how tempting the visions might be. It was then that he noticed the figure standing on the far side of the lake. They were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and pale, glowing skin. Their eyes were dark voids, and their movements were slow and deliberate, as if they were moving through water. These were the Dream Keepers, the guardians of the Grove of Forgotten Dreams. Ikin watched as the Dream Keepers moved gracefully around the lake, their long fingers skimming the surface, collecting the dreams that floated there. They were the caretakers of the forest, tasked with preserving the dreams of the dead and ensuring that they remained in the grove. But as Ikin observed them, he noticed something strange. The Dream Keepers were not just collecting the dreams, they were feeding on them. Each time one of them touched a dream, a faint glow would pass from the dream into the keeper, and the dream would fade, becoming weaker and less distinct. Ikin's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the true nature of the dream keepers. They were not benevolent guardians, they were predators, feeding on the dreams of the dead to sustain themselves. And now that Ikin had entered their domain, they would not hesitate to feed on his dreams as well. He knew he had to be careful. The dream keepers were powerful beings, and if they discovered him, they would surely try to take his dreams. But Ikin also knew that he had no choice but to continue. Somewhere in this forest lay the dream that could save his sister, and he was determined to find it. With a deep breath, Ikin stepped forward, moving cautiously around the edge of the lake. The dream keepers seemed to be unaware of his presence, their attention focused on the dreams in the water. But Ikin knew he couldn't let his guard down, not for a moment. As he moved, he noticed a faint trail leading away from the lake and deeper into the forest. The trail was barely visible, but it was there, a narrow path winding through the twisted trees. Ikin hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the dream keepers, but he knew he had no choice. He had to follow the trail, no matter where it led. With a final glance at the shimmering lake, Ikin turned and began to make his way down the trail, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the presence of the dream keepers behind him, and he knew that they would not let him go so easily. But he pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere along this path lay the dream that could save Adana. And as he ventured deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the forest itself was urging him to turn back. But Ikin was resolute. He had come too far to give up now. The journey ahead would not be easy, and the dangers he would face would test his strength and resolve. But Ikin was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, for he knew that his sister's life depended on it. And so, with the shadows of the forest closing in around him, Ikin continued on his journey, unaware that the dream thief was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The deeper Ikin journeyed into the Sapir forest, the more the line between reality and illusion blurred. The trees whispered secrets, their leaves rustling with voices that sounded almost human. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, and strange, ethereal lights flickered in the distance. But Ikin pressed on, determined to find the dream that could save his sister. As he walked, the path grew narrower and more treacherous, winding through dense thickets and over gnarled roots that seemed to reach out to trip him. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over him like a heavy cloak. He could feel the presence of the dream keepers behind him, their dark eyes watching his every move. But he knew he could not stop, not now, not when he was so close. It was then that he heard it, a soft, melodic voice, singing a lullaby that tugged at the edges of his memory. The voice was gentle and soothing, and it seemed to be calling out to him, urging him to follow. Ikin hesitated, his instincts telling him to ignore the voice and keep moving. But the song was so familiar, so comforting, that he couldn't help but be drawn to it. He followed the sound, his steps slow and cautious. The forest around him seemed to shift and change, the trees parting to reveal a small clearing bathed in a soft, golden light. In the center of the clearing stood a woman, her back to him, her long, dark hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. She wore a flowing white dress, and her hands were clasped in front of her as she continued to sing the lullaby. Ikin's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the song. It was the same lullaby that his mother used to sing to him and Adana when they were children, a song that had always made them feel safe and loved. But his mother had passed away many years ago, and the sight of this woman, singing that same song, filled him with a sense of longing and sorrow. "Mother," Ikin whispered, his voice barely audible. The woman slowly turned to face him, and Ikin's breath caught in his throat. It was his mother, her face exactly as he remembered it, kind, gentle, and full of love. She smiled at him, her eyes shining with warmth and affection. "Ikin, My son, she said softly, her voice like a balm to his weary soul. You have come so far. I am proud of you. Tears welled up in Ikin's eyes as he stepped forward, reaching out to embrace her. Mother, But before he could finish his sentence, the woman stepped back, her smile fading. You mustn't go any further, Ikin, she said, her voice tinged with sadness. The path ahead is dangerous. If you continue, you will lose yourself. Please, turn back. Ikin froze, torn between the desire to listen to his mother's warning and the need to save his sister. I can't, mother, he said, his voice trembling. Adana is dying. I have to find the dream that can save her. His mother shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. There is no dream that can save her, she said softly. The forest is a place of illusions, of lies. If you continue, you will be lost forever. Please, Ikin, come back with me. We can be together again, as a family. The temptation was overwhelming. Ikin wanted nothing more than to be with his mother again, to feel her warmth and love. But deep down, he knew that this was not real. His mother was gone, and the woman before him was nothing more than an illusion, a trick of the forest. With a heavy heart, Ikin took a step back. You're not my mother, he said, his voice firm. You're just an illusion, a creation of the forest. I won't be deceived. The woman's expression darkened, and her form began to shimmer and fade, revealing the twisted, nightmarish creature beneath. It hissed at him, its eyes glowing with malevolence, but Ikin stood his ground, refusing to be swayed. I will find the dream, he said, his voice steady. And I will save my sister. The creature let out a guttural snarl before vanishing into the shadows, leaving Ikin alone in the clearing. The golden light faded, and the forest returned to its dark, twisted state. But Ikin's resolve had only grown stronger. He knew now that the forest would do everything in its power to stop him, to trick him into giving up. But he would not be deterred. He had faced his deepest longing and resisted its pull, and now he was ready to face whatever other challenges the forest had in store. With renewed determination, Ikin turned and continued down the path, his heart set on his goal. The forest was a place of nightmares and illusions, but Ikin was determined to see through them all. And as he walked, he could feel the presence of the dream thief growing stronger, lurking just beyond the edge of his awareness, waiting for the moment to strike. The twisted path through the supple forest seemed endless, each step bringing Ikin deeper into the heart of the cursed woods. The air grew colder, and the once faint whispers were now a cacophony of voices, each one more desperate and pleading than the last. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches clawing at his skin as if trying to pull him back. But Ikin pressed on, driven by the thought of his sister's waning strength. He could feel the forest influence growing stronger, its dark magic seeping into his mind, trying to erode his will. But he was determined to resist, to push forward no matter the cost. As he walked, the path suddenly opened up into a wide clearing. The ground was covered in thick, swirling mist that seemed to cling to Ikin's legs, pulling him down with every step. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, ancient tree, its trunk twisted and blackened as if burned by some terrible fire. The tree's roots snaked out in every direction, like the tendrils of a monstrous creature, and at its base was a dark, yawning hole that seemed to lead deep into the earth. Ikin knew instinctively that this was the dream thief's lair. The whispers grew louder as he approached the tree, the voices mingling together in a dissonant chorus that sent chills down his spine. But Ikin stilled himself, knowing that he had come too far to turn back now. He could feel the presence of the dream thief, lurking within the darkness of the tree, waiting for him to come closer. With a deep breath, Ikin stepped forward, descending into the dark hole at the base of the tree. The air inside was thick and suffocating, filled with the stench of decay and the faint, acrid smell of burnt wood. The tunnel was narrow and winding, and Ikin had to crouch low to avoid the jagged roots that jutted out from the walls. As he moved deeper into the tunnel, the whispers faded, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the earth. It was a sound that filled Ikin with a sense of dread, as if the very ground beneath his feet was alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy. The air grew colder still, and Ikin could see his breath misting in front of him as he continued down the tunnel. He was close now, he could feel it. Finally, the tunnel opened up into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling was so high that it was lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with twisted roots that seemed to pulse with a sickly, greenish light. In the center of the chamber stood the Dream Thief. The creature was unlike anything Ikin had ever seen. It was tall and gaunt, its body covered in dark, tattered robes that seemed to shift and writhe as if they were alive. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but Ikin could see its eyes, two glowing orbs of crimson light that burned with an unnatural fire. The air around the Dream Thief seemed to ripple and distort, as if the creature's very presence was warping reality. In its long, bony fingers, the Dream Thief held a small, glowing orb. Ikin knew instantly what it was: the dream he had been searching for. The dream that held the cure for his sister's illness. But as Ikin stepped forward, the Dream Thief raised its head, its crimson eyes locking onto him. A deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "You have come far, mortal," the Dream Thief said, its voice dripping with malice. "But this dream is mine. You will not take it from me." Ikin's heart pounded in his chest as he stared down the Dream Thief. He knew he had to be careful, this creature was powerful, and he was in its domain. But he also knew that he couldn't live without the dream. Adana's life depended on it. "I have no choice," Ikin said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "My sister is dying, and this dream is the only thing that can save her. I will do whatever it takes to get it." The Dream Thief let out a low, menacing laugh. "Brave words, boy. But do you truly understand the price of what you seek? Dreams are not meant to be stolen. They are the essence of life, the very fabric of existence. To take one is to sever a thread from the great tapestry of the world. Are you willing to pay that price?" Ikin hesitated. He had come all this way, driven by the love for his sister and the desperation to save her. But now, faced with the reality of what he was about to do, doubt crept into his mind. What if taking the dream would have dire consequences? What if saving Adana meant dooming someone else? But then he thought of his sister, of her frail body lying in bed, of the way her eyes had lost their light, of the pain she must be enduring. He couldn't let her die. He wouldn't. "I will pay whatever price I must," Ikin said, his voice filled with determination. "I will take that dream and save my sister, no matter the cost." The Dream Thief's eyes glowed brighter, and it let out another laugh, this one filled with dark amusement. "Very well, mortal. If you wish to claim this dream, you must face me. But be warned, no one has ever defeated the Dream Thief. Many have tried, and all have failed. Their dreams are mine now, lost to the void." With that, the Dream Thief raised its hand, and the chamber began to tremble. The roots along the walls twisted and writhed, and the ground beneath Ikin's feet cracked and splintered. Shadows gathered around the Dream Thief, coalescing into dark, twisted forms that began to advance toward Ikin. Ikin gripped his knife, his only weapon, tightly in his hand. He knew that this was the final battle, the moment that would decide everything. If he failed, not only would he lose the dream, he would lose his life as well. But Ikin had faced many dangers in the Sapir forest, and he had survived them all. He had resisted the forest illusions, outwitted the dream keepers, and made it this far. He would not give up now. With a shout, Ikin charged forward, his knife gleaming in the dim light of the chamber. The shadows lunged at him, their forms shifting and changing as they tried to overwhelm him. But Ikin fought with everything he had, slashing at the shadows with his knife, dodging their attacks, and refusing to back down. The dream thief watched, its crimson eyes glowing with malevolent glee. It raised its hand again, and the shadows grew stronger, more aggressive. They lashed out at Ikin, their dark tendrils wrapping around his arms and legs, trying to pull him down. But Ikin fought on, fueled by his love for his sister and his determination to save her. He could feel the exhaustion setting in, his limbs growing heavy, but he refused to give in. He had come too far to fail now. Finally, with one last, desperate surge of strength, Ikin broke free of the shadows and lunged at the dream thief. He drove his knife into the creature's chest, right where its heart should be. The dream thief let out a terrible, piercing scream as its body convulsed, the shadows around it writhing and thrashing. The creature's crimson eyes dimmed, and its dark robes began to disintegrate, turning to dust and blowing away in the wind. And then, with a final shudder, the dream thief collapsed to the ground, its body crumbling to ash. Ikin stood over the remains of the dream thief, breathing heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. The chamber was silent, the shadows gone, the air still. He had won. He had defeated the dream thief. But his victory was bittersweet. The dream, the glowing orb that the dream thief had held, was gone. It had vanished along with the creature, lost to the void. Ikin fell to his knees, despair washing over him. After all he had been through, all he had fought for, the dream was gone. He had failed. But as he sat there, the darkness closing in around him, he heard a voice, a soft, gentle voice that filled the chamber with warmth and light. Ikin, the voice said. Do not despair. The dream is not lost. Ikin looked up, his heart pounding. In the center of the chamber, where the dream thief had fallen, a small, glowing orb appeared. It floated in the air, pulsing with a soft, golden light. The dream was never truly the dream thief's, the voice continued. It belongs to those who are pure of heart, to those who fight for love and selflessness. You have proven yourself worthy, Ikin. Take the dream and save your sister. Tears filled Ikin's eyes as he reached out and took the glowing orb in his hands. The warmth of the dream filled him with hope, with joy, with the knowledge that he had not failed. He had won, and he had saved his sister. With the dream in his grasp, Ikin stood and made his way back through the tunnel, back to the surface, back to the light. The forest had tried to break him, but he had emerged victorious. And as he stepped out of the sapphire forest, the dream clutched tightly in his hand. Ikin knew that he had not only saved his sister, he had saved himself. The journey back through the sapphire forest was as treacherous as the path inward, but Ikin moved with a newfound resolve. The golden orb, now glowing gently in his hand, seemed to light the way ahead, casting a warm glow that cut through the forest's oppressive darkness. His heart, though still heavy with exhaustion, was buoyed by the hope of saving his sister. The forest, having witnessed Ikin's struggle and triumph, seemed to shift its demeanor. The oppressive shadows receded, and the twisted trees stood straight, their branches no longer clawing at him. The whispers that had once tried to lead him astray were now silent, as if acknowledging his victory. As Ikin emerged from the forest, the sky was beginning to lighten, the first rays of dawn breaking through the canopy. He breathed in the fresh air, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The forest had been a trial unlike any he had ever faced, but he had succeeded. He hurried back to the village, the orb clutched tightly in his hand. The journey seemed to take forever, the anticipation of reuniting with his sister driving him forward. The sun was rising higher as he approached his home, and the village was beginning to stir. As he entered the village, he was greeted by worried faces. Word of his quest had spread, and the villagers had gathered, their expressions a mix of concern and hope. They had seen him leave, and now they watched anxiously for his return. Ikin made his way through the crowd, his eyes searching for his family. His heart ached with the thought of his sister's condition. When he reached his home, he saw Adana lying in bed, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Ikin approached them, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've returned," he said, holding out the glowing orb. "I have the dream that can save Adana." Is it true?" she asked, her voice catching in her throat. Ikin nodded, tears streaming down his face. "It is." With trembling hands, he placed the orb gently on the small table beside Adana's bed. The golden light from the orb filled the room, casting a warm, soothing glow. The orb's light seemed to pause in time with Adana's breathing, and Ikin watched in awe as the color began to return to her cheeks. The villagers gathered around, their eyes wide with amazement as the light from the orb enveloped Adana. Her breathing grew steadier, and the pallor of illness began to fade. The room was filled with a sense of relief and joy as Adana's eyes fluttered open. "Ikin," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with recognition. "Is it really you?" Ikin knelt by her bedside, tears of happiness streaming down his face. "Yes, Adana. It's me. You're going to be all right." Adana reached out a trembling hand to touch his face, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved me." The villagers erupted into cheers, their voices rising in celebration. The once somber atmosphere was now filled with joy and relief. Ikin smiled through his tears, his heart swelling with pride and happiness. He had faced the trials of the Sapir forest, battled the dream thief, and returned victorious. His sister was saved, and his family was whole again. But even as he reveled in the joy of his victory, he knew that the journey had changed him. The Sapir forest had tested his strength and his resolve, and he had emerged stronger and wiser. He had learned that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it for the ones he loved. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the village, Ikin felt a deep sense of peace. The dream that had once seemed so elusive was now a beacon of hope and healing. And as he looked around at the faces of his family and friends, he knew that his journey had not only saved his sister but had also strengthened the bonds of love and unity within his community.